The cold was the first thing I noticed, a sharp, crystalline chill that seeped through the cracks of the old wooden window frame in my childhood bedroom. It wasn't a harsh cold, not the biting, unforgiving freeze of a winter storm, but the kind of cold that promises something, a clean, star-dusted cold that carried on its breath the scent of pine needles and distant wood smoke. I was 10 years old, and to me, that particular cold had a single, glorious meaning: Christmas Eve had finally arrived. Downstairs, the house was a symphony of familiar sounds and smells, a chaotic, beautiful prelude to the night's festivities. The deep, resonant hum of my father's voice mingled with the frantic, cheerful clatter of pots and pans from the kitchen, where my mother was undoubtedly orchestrating the culinary marvel that was our Christmas dinner. The air itself was thick and warm, layered with the rich, buttery scent of roasted turkey, the sweet, spiced perfume of cinnamon and cloves from the simmering red wine, and the unmistakable, comforting aroma of freshly baked cheese bread, its golden crusts just begging to be broken. I crept down the creaking staircase, each wooden step groaning a familiar protest under my weight, a sound as much a part of Christmas as the carols on the radio. The living room was a spectacle of controlled chaos. My older brother, Carlos, was engaged in his annual battle with the Christmas tree, a magnificent, lopsided fur that seemed to defy all attempts at symmetry. A tangle of fairy lights lay at his feet like a nest of captured serpents, and he was muttering under his breath, a string of good-natured curses that made me giggle. "Hold this end, Miguel," he grumbled, spotting me. His hands were full of tiny, multicolored bulbs. "This wire has a mind of its own, I swear it's alive." I rushed to his side, the rough texture of the carpet prickling against my bare feet. I took the end of the light string, the plastic casing cool and smooth in my hand. The room was bathed in the soft, golden glow of a single floor lamp, casting long, dancing shadows that played across the walls, making the unopened presents piled beneath the tree seem to twitch and shiver with anticipation. Suddenly, the front door swung open, and a gust of that invigorating night air rushed in, cutting through the warm, food-scented atmosphere. And there she was. Tia Elisa. She stood on the welcome mat, her cheeks flushed a bright, rosy pink from the cold, her dark eyes sparkling with a secret amusement that seemed to be her default state. She wore a thick, woolen coat the color of red wine, and a scarf was wrapped several times around her neck, its fringes dusted with what looked like tiny, melting stars. "Antrim, Antrim. Close the door, the North Pole is coming in with you," my mother called from the kitchen, her voice laced with laughter. Tia Elisa laughed, a sound like ringing bells, and stepped fully inside, closing the heavy door with a solid thud that shut out the world. She was not just my aunt, she was an event. She traveled, you see. While the rest of our family was firmly, comfortably rooted in our small town, Tia Elisa had notebooks filled with stamps from places I could only dream of: Paris, Tokyo, Cairo. She carried the scent of foreign airports and strange spices on her clothes, and her stories were our windows to a wider, more magical world. She shrugged off her coat, revealing a sweater embroidered with playful reindeer, and held up a large, somewhat battered leather bag, its surface worn soft and shiny in places. It wasn't a suitcase, nor was it a typical handbag. It was a storyteller's bag. "This," she announced, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper that immediately drew Carlos and me closer, "is a very special night. And for a very special night, we need a very special tradition." My father emerged from the kitchen, wiping his hands on a towel, a warm smile gracing his tired face. "What has your sister brought to disrupt our peace this time, Elisa?" he asked, his tone fond. "Not disrupt, dear brother," she corrected, her eyes twinkling. "Enhance." She placed the bag carefully on the sofa, its weight making the cushions sigh. "This is a tradition I learned in a small village in the Czech Republic. It's called the Gifts of the 12 Hours." We all stared at her, intrigued. The only gifts we knew were the ones wrapped in shiny paper under the tree, to be torn open at the stroke of midnight. Tia Elisa unbuttoned the clasp of the bag. The sound was a soft, definitive click that seemed to hush the entire house. "It's simple, and yet, it is everything," she began, her voice taking on the rhythmic, melodic quality of a born narrator. "From 6 o'clock in the evening until 6 o'clock on Christmas morning, at the top of every hour, we will open one small gift. Not a grand present, not a new bicycle or a video game." She looked directly at me, her gaze soft and knowing. "But a gift for the spirit. A gift for the moment. A piece of magic to be shared by all of us, together." She reached into the bag and pulled out the first item. It was a simple, brown paper package, tied with a piece of rough, jute twine. It was small enough to fit in the palm of her hand. She held it up as if it were a sacred relic. "This," she said, "is for the first hour. For 6 o'clock. The gift of remembrance." She didn't hand it to any one of us. Instead, she walked to the center of the room, where the light from the lamp pooled on the carpet, and she sat down, cross-legged, gesturing for us to join her. My parents exchanged a glance, a look of mild bemusement mixed with affection, but they came. Carlos, forgetting his battle with the lights, sat beside me. We formed a small, hushed circle around my aunt and the mysterious little package. "The rule," Tia Elisa said softly, her fingers gently stroking the rough paper, "is that we must be fully present. We must listen, or feel, or taste, or remember. We must do it together. No one is a spectator. Everyone is a participant. Do we agree?" We all nodded, a silent pact made in the warm, shadowy living room. The only sound was the gentle hiss and pop of the logs in the fireplace, which my father had just lit, the flames beginning to dance and cast a flickering, orange light across our faces. "Good," she whispered. "Then let the first hour begin." With deliberate, slow movements, she untied the twine, which fell away with a soft rustle. She peeled back the plain paper, revealing not a box, but a small, old-fashioned photograph. It was black and white, faded at the edges. She held it out so we could all see. It was a picture of my grandparents, my mother's parents, standing in front of this very house, decades ago. They were young, their faces unlined, their smiles bright and full of a future they could not yet see. My grandmother was holding a tiny, swaddled baby, my mother. The sight of it sent a jolt through the room. My mother let out a small, choked gasp, her hand flying to her mouth. Her eyes, in the firelight, glistened with sudden, unshed tears. "This," Tia Elisa said, her voice thick with emotion, "is the gift of remembrance. To remember where we come from. To remember the love that built these walls, that filled these rooms with laughter and arguments and life long before any of us were here. To remember that we are links in a chain, a beautiful, unbreakable chain of family." She passed the photograph to my mother, whose fingers trembled as she took it. She stared at it, her thumb tracing the outline of her mother's face. "I've never seen this picture," she whispered, her voice cracking. "Where did you find it?" "In a box of old things in the attic of their old house," Tia Elisa said gently. "I had it restored. I thought it was time he came home for Christmas." For a long moment, no one spoke. We just sat there, in a circle, watching my mother remember. The air was thick with a new kind of warmth, a profound, aching sweetness that had nothing to do with the fireplace. The smell of roasting turkey, the sound of a carol drifting in from the kitchen radio, the feel of the carpet beneath me, it all fused with this new, overwhelming emotion. It was as if my grandparents had quietly entered the room and taken a seat with us, their presence a comforting, tangible thing. My father reached over and squeezed my mother's hand. Carlos, usually so boisterous, was silent, his gaze fixed on the photograph with a rare, thoughtful intensity. And I felt a connection, a sense of history and belonging that was far more powerful than any toy I had wished for that year. This was a different kind of gift. It was a gift for the soul. Tia Elisa smiled, a serene, satisfied smile. "And that," she said softly, "is the first hour." The spell was broken, but gently, like the slow fading of a beautiful chord of music. We rose from our circle, the atmosphere in the room forever altered, charged with a new depth of feeling. The photograph was placed carefully on the mantelpiece, leaning against the wall, where the faces of my young grandparents could smile down upon our festivities. It was no longer just our Christmas, it was now their Christmas, too. The next hour passed in a blur of heightened anticipation. The mundane tasks of finishing the tree and setting the table were now imbued with a new significance. We were all waiting, our internal clocks tuned to the slow, steady march of time towards 7 o'clock. The grandfather clock in the hallway, with its ponderous, oak casing and brass pendulum, became the heart of the house. Its deep, resonant ticking was a drumbeat counting down to the next piece of magic. When the first chime of 7 o'clock began to sound, a single, clear, bronze note that hung in the air, we were already gathered back in the living room, drawn by an invisible thread. The tree was now fully decorated, a glittering, proud sentinel in the corner, its lights twinkling and reflecting in the dark glass of the window panes. The smell of the fir tree mixed with the aroma of dinner, creating a scent that was, for me, the very essence of Christmas. Tia Elisa approached her leather bag with the reverence of a priestess at an altar. She reached inside and pulled out the second package. This one was slightly larger, wrapped in the same simple brown paper, but tied with a green ribbon. For the second hour, she announced, her eyes scanning our eager faces. The gift of song. She unwrapped the package to reveal a stack of small, handmade booklets. They were constructed from sheets of folded paper, stapled together clumsily at the spine. On the cover of each, in Tia Elisa's elegant, looping handwriting, were the words Cancos do Nosso Natal, Songs of Our Christmas. She handed one to each of us. I took mine, feeling the rough texture of the paper. Inside, the lyrics to Christmas carols were written out by hand. But they weren't just the standard, well-known carols. Alongside Noite Feliz and Beto Sino were songs I had never heard of, with strange, beautiful titles. Boris, O Elefante, Pinheirinhos, Vem-ai o Papai Noel. These, Tia Elisa explained, are the songs of my childhood, and of your mother's childhood. Some are from Brazil, some I collected from my travels. They are our songs, the soundtrack of our family's Christmases past. My mother let out a soft, delighted laugh as she flipped through her booklet. Oh, meu Deus! Boris, O Elefante. I haven't sung this since I was a little girl. Papa used to sing it in the silliest voice. My voice is plenty silly, my father declared, puffing out his chest in mock pride, which made Carlos snort. The gift, Tia Elisa continued, raising her voice slightly to regain our attention, is not just the booklet. The gift is the singing. All of us. Together. No excuses. She walked over to the old piano that sat, mostly unused, in the far corner of the room. She lifted the fallboard, revealing the yellowed ivory keys. She sat on the worn velvet stool and placed her fingers on the keys. For a moment, she was still, and then she began to play. The notes were a little tinny, the piano slightly out of tune, but the melody that flowed from her fingertips was instantly recognizable, warm, and full of joy. It was Noite Feliz. My mother began to sing first, her voice a clear, sweet soprano that floated easily above the piano's melody. Then my father joined in, his voice a deep, rumbling baritone that provided a solid, comforting foundation. Carlos, after a moment of embarrassed hesitation, added his own hesitant tenor. And I sang with all my heart, my childish treble weaving through the voices of my family. We sang song after song. We stumbled over the words to the unfamiliar ones, laughing as Tia Elisa loudly sang the correct lines. We harmonized on the classics, our voices blending into a single, powerful instrument of family. The sound filled the house, pushing against the walls, rising to the ceiling. It was more than music, it was a physical force, a vibration of pure, unadulterated joy. I could feel the sound in my chest, a resonant hum that matched the warmth spreading through my body. The flickering firelight seemed to dance in time with our singing, and the twinkling lights on the tree became stars keeping rhythm. We were no longer just a family in a room. We were a choir, a single entity bound together by melody and memory. The gift of song was, I realized, the gift of our collective voice, a sound I would carry with me for the rest of my life. By the time the clock chimed 8, the echoes of our singing still seemed to linger in the air, clinging to the curtains and the furniture like a pleasant perfume. Our throats were a little sore, but our spirits were soaring. The atmosphere was so thick with happiness you could almost taste it, a flavor like honey and citrus and spiced wine. Tia Elisa, her face flushed with the effort of playing and singing, returned to her magical bag. This time, she retrieved a package that was flat and square, and it rustled as she moved it. For the third hour, she said, her voice a little hoarse but still brimming with energy. The gift of warmth. She unwrapped it to reveal a stack of blankets. But these were not ordinary blankets from a store. They were a motley collection of throws and afghans, each one unique. One was a thick, chunky knit in cream-colored wool, another was a patchwork quilt made from what looked like old flannel shirts, and a third was a soft, fleecy blanket with a pattern of little snowmen. "These are comfort blankets," she explained, handing one to each of us. "The quilt was made by Vovô, from your avou's old work shirts." My father took it, his hands running over the soft, worn flannel squares, a distant, tender look in his eyes. "The knit one was my first and only successful knitting project," Tia Elisa admitted with a chuckle. "And the snowman, well, that one is just soft." "The rule for this gift," she declared, "was that we had to wrap ourselves up and relocate to the floor, right in front of the roaring fireplace. We created a nest of cushions and blankets, a fortress of coziness in the middle of the living room. I snuggled deep into my fleecy snowman blanket, its synthetic fibers soft and warm against my skin. The heat from the fire washed over us, a dry, penetrating warmth that made my cheeks tingle. My father, wrapped in his father's quilt, let out a long, contented sigh. I haven't felt this warm since I was a boy and he'd let me sit by the fire after playing in the snow. We sat in comfortable silence for a while, listening to the symphony of the fire, the crackle of the pine logs, the soft hiss of escaping sap, the deep, resonant roar as a flame found a new pocket of resin to devour. The light danced across our faces, painting them in shifting patterns of orange and gold. The smell of wood smoke was clean and primal, a scent that spoke of shelter and safety against the cold, dark night outside. This gift was not about doing or remembering. It was about being. Being present, being comfortable, being together. It was a tactile, physical manifestation of the emotional warmth that was already filling the house. Lying there, wrapped in my blanket, with the fire warming my feet and the sound of my family's quiet breathing around me, I felt a sense of peace so profound it was almost dizzying. This was the heart of it all, I thought. This simple, quiet, shared warmth. The chime for 9 o'clock was a gentle intrusion into our fire-lit reverie. We stirred from our blanket nest, our bodies languid and heavy with contentment. The anticipation for the next gift was now a pleasant thrum in the background of our minds, a constant, low-level excitement that made the entire night feel like a slow-burning firework display. Tia Elisa emerged from the kitchen, not with a package from her bag, but with a tray. On it sat 5 small, ceramic mugs, steaming gently, and a tall, elegant glass pitcher filled with a creamy, pale yellow liquid. A long cinnamon stick and a few star anises floated inside it like exotic, spiced fish. "For the 4th hour," she proclaimed, setting the tray down on the low coffee table with a soft clink. "The gift of nourishment." The scent that rose from the pitcher was divine, a complex melody of sweet, creamy, and spicy notes. It was the smell of childhood Christmases, of comfort and indulgence. "This," she said, pouring the thick liquid into the mugs, "is traditional eggnog. But not from a carton. This is the real thing, a recipe I learned from a lovely old woman in Vermont. Milk, cream, eggs, sugar, a touch of nutmeg, and a whisper of good, dark rum for the adults." She winked at my parents, then handed Carlos and me our mugs. "And for you too, the very same, but without the whisper." I wrapped my hands around the warm ceramic of the mug. The heat was almost too much to bear at first, a searing comfort that seeped into my palms. I brought it to my lips and took a cautious sip. It was unlike anything I had ever tasted. Rich, velvety, and decadently sweet, with the warm, earthy kick of nutmeg and the subtle, aromatic hint of cinnamon. It coated my tongue and warmed a path all the way down to my stomach, spreading a golden, glowing heat from my core outward. "Wow," Carlos murmured, his eyes wide as he looked into his mug. This is incredible." We sat back in our blanket nests, cradling our mugs, sipping the luxurious drink in silence. The combination of the sweet, spicy eggnog and the radiant heat from the fireplace was almost unbearably cozy. It was a gift for the senses of taste and smell, a deliberate, shared moment of pure, unadulterated pleasure. My mother closed her eyes as she drank, a slow smile spreading across her face. My father nodded in appreciation, a man not easily impressed by culinary delights, but clearly won over. "This is nourishment for more than just the body, Elisa," my mother said softly, her voice thick with emotion. "This is food for the soul." Tia Elisa simply smiled, sipping her own drink. The gift was doing its work, binding us together not just through shared activity or memory, but through a shared, sensory experience. We were all tasting the same magic, feeling the same warmth spread through our bodies, united by the simple, profound act of drinking together. The clock struck 10, its chime seeming to resonate with the rich, creamy sweetness still lingering on our tongues. The eggnog had settled into a warm, pleasant weight in our stomachs, and the fire had burned down to a bed of glowing, pulsating embers that cast a deep, ruby light across the room. The earlier frenzy had completely subsided, replaced by a drowsy, profound sense of well-being. Tia Elisa moved quietly, so as not to shatter the peaceful atmosphere. She went to her bag and retrieved a package that was long and thin, wrapped in a deep blue paper that shimmered in the low light. For the 5th hour, she whispered, her voice barely louder than the crackle of the dying fire. The gift of starlight. She unwrapped the package to reveal a simple, cylindrical object made of dark metal, perforated with what looked like a random pattern of holes. It had a handle on top and a small door on its side. It was a lantern. An old-fashioned, celestial lantern. She opened the small door and placed a fat, white candle inside, securing it in a pool of melted wax at the base. Then, using a long match struck against the hearth, she lit the wick. A warm, yellow flame sprang to life inside the metal cylinder. She closed the little door. Now, she said, we turn off all the other lights. My father, moving with a quiet reverence I had never seen in him before, stood and switched off the floor lamp. Carlos, understanding the assignment, unplugged the twinkling Christmas tree lights. The room was plunged into a profound darkness, broken only by the faint, blood-orange glow from the fireplace embers. Then, Tia Elisa lifted the lantern by its handle. A miracle happened. The light from the candle inside streamed out through the perforated holes, and it was not just random points of light. The pattern resolved itself into constellations. Tiny, perfect pinpricks of light danced and shimmered on the walls, on the ceiling, across our faces and hands. It was as if we had been instantly transported to the heart of a clear, winter night sky. I could see the familiar shape of Orion, the hunter, his belt of 3 stars shining brightly. There was the Big Dipper, Cassiopeia on her throne. A collective, soft gasp went through the room. Oh, Elisa, my mother breathed, her face turned upward, her eyes reflecting 1,000 tiny stars. It's the winter sky, Tia Elisa explained softly. As it would look tonight, if the clouds cleared. This is the gift of starlight. To remind us of the vast, beautiful universe that watches over our little world. To remind us that we are small, but connected to something infinite and magnificent. We lay back on our blankets, our heads close together, and simply watched. The starry pattern swayed gently as the lantern hung from Tia Elisa's hand. The room was utterly silent, save for the soft, rhythmic sound of our breathing. The heat from the eggnog, the residual warmth from the fire, the soft pressure of the blanket, and now this celestial spectacle, it was an overwhelming bombardment of peace. I felt my eyes grow heavy, not with tiredness, but with a blissful, weightless contentment. I was floating in a sea of stars, anchored only by the presence of my family around me. It was the most beautiful thing I had ever seen. The 11th hour chime was a deep, sonorous sound that seemed to pull us gently back from the edge of dreams. The celestial lantern still hung, its starry patterns now faint against the walls as the candle within began to gutter and wane. The magic of the starlight had left a hushed, almost sacred quiet in its wake. We were all still lying on the floor, cocooned in our blankets, reluctant to let the moment go. Tia Elisa moved slowly, as if not to disturb the lingering stardust in the air. She approached her bag one more time. From its depths, she pulled a package that was different from the others. It was not wrapped in paper, but in a piece of deep green, velvety fabric, tied with a silver cord. It was small and rectangular, like a book. She sat back down in our circle, the fabric-wrapped parcel resting in her lap. The light from the single, dying candle and the lantern cast deep, dancing shadows across her face, making her look both ancient and ageless. For the 6th hour, she said, her voice a low, melodic murmur that seemed to vibrate in the quiet room. The gift of story. She untied the silver cord and let the green velvet fall away. It was a book. But not a new book. Its cover was of worn, brown leather, scuffed at the corners and softened to a buttery texture by countless hands. The pages were edged in gold, but the gold was faded and spotted with age. There was no title on the cover. This, Tia Elisa said, running her fingers over the leather with a lover's touch, is not a book of stories. It is a book for a story. Our story. She opened it. The pages were blank. Not a single word was written on the thick, creamy paper. I don't understand, Carlos said, his voice cracking a little from the long silence. It's empty. Exactly, Tia Elisa replied, a smile playing on her lips. The gift is not a story to be heard, but a story to be created. Together. Right now. She produced a beautiful old-fashioned fountain pen from her pocket, its barrel a deep, swirling maroon. The rule is simple. We will create a Christmas story. One sentence at a time. We will go around the circle. I will start, and then Mother, then Father, then Carlos, then Miguel, and then back to me. We will build it, word by word, sentence by sentence. We will not plan. We will not judge. We will simply let the story unfold, as unpredictable and wonderful as life itself. She opened the book to the first page. The sound of the crisp, blank page turning was loud in the stillness. She uncapped the pen, the click echoing softly. She brought the nib to the paper, and it whispered as she began to write in her elegant script. She wrote the first sentence, speaking it aloud as she did. On a night when the stars clung to the sky like frozen silver tears, a lone clockmaker named Alistair finished his greatest creation. She handed the book and the pen to my mother. My mother took them, a look of surprise and then intense concentration on her face. She thought for a long moment, the only sound the soft hiss of the last ember in the fireplace. Then she bent her head and wrote, her voice soft but clear. But the clock, a magnificent thing of brass and dreams, was missing its heart, a single, perfect cog that had been lost to time. She passed the book to my father. He frowned, his brow furrowed. He was a practical man, an engineer. A story of magic and missing cogs was not his usual territory. But then, a slow smile spread across his face. He took the pen. So Alistair wrapped himself in his warmest coat, the one that smelled of pipe smoke and patience, and stepped out into the snow-cloaked city, determined to find a heart for his broken clock. My father handed the book to Carlos, who seized it with a newfound excitement. He didn't hesitate for a second. He walked for hours, through streets where the laughter of children hung in the air like invisible bells, until he found a tiny, forgotten shop that glowed with a warm, golden light, a shop that hadn't been there the day before. Then it was my turn. My heart was pounding. The pressure was immense. I had to continue this beautiful, strange story. I took the heavy book and the pen, feeling the weight of the narrative in my hands. I looked at the faces of my family, all watching me, waiting. I thought of the starlight, the eggnog, the singing, the warmth. I thought of the love that filled this room. I bent over the page, the nib hovering. And then I knew. And inside, instead of a grizzled old shopkeeper, he found a family, sitting in a circle on the floor, sharing gifts that were not wrapped in paper, but in moments. I handed the book back to Tia Elisa. She read my sentence, and her eyes filled with tears. She looked at each of us, her gaze lingering on each face, imprinting this moment into her memory. Then she took the pen and wrote the final sentence, her voice thick with emotion. And the family smiled at him, and offered him a cup of eggnog, and in that moment, Alistair the clockmaker found not the cog he was looking for, but the heart he had always been missing. She closed the book. The story was complete. A perfect, spontaneous, collaborative creation born from the collective imagination of our family. It was our story. It was a story about us, though it spoke of a clockmaker and a magical shop. It was a testament to the magic we had created in this room over the past 6 hours. The gift of story had not been about listening. It had been about creating. About adding our own voice, our own unique thread, to the tapestry of the narrative. We had built something out of nothing, together. And as I looked at the closed, leather-bound book in Tia Elisa's lap, I knew that this was perhaps the greatest gift of all. It was the gift of our shared imagination, a tangible proof that together, we could create magic. The final chime of midnight was not a single note, but a glorious, cascading peal that erupted from the grandfather clock in the hall, a triumphant fanfare announcing the arrival of Christmas Day. The sound seemed to shake the very foundations of the house, breaking the last delicate spell of the story we had woven. But it didn't feel like an ending, it felt like a new beginning. As the last chime faded into silence, the world outside our cocoon came rushing back. The smell of the Christmas feast, now perfectly ready, wafted strongly from the kitchen. The twinkling lights of the tree, which Carlos quickly plugged back in, now seemed to blaze with a renewed, joyful intensity. The photograph of my grandparents on the mantel seemed to smile brighter. It was time for the main event, dinner and the opening of the traditional presents. But as we rose from our blanket nest, stretching our stiff limbs, I realized something profound. The frantic, greedy excitement I usually felt at the prospect of tearing open brightly wrapped boxes had been entirely transformed. The anticipation was still there, a bright, happy bubble in my chest, but it was no longer the center of the universe. The center of the universe had been our circle on the floor, our shared stories, our combined voices, our collective warmth. We moved to the dining table, which my mother had set with her best china and a beautiful centerpiece of pine cones and red berries. The turkey was golden and majestic, the salads vibrant, the cheese breads piled high in a basket. We sat down, and as my father began to carve the bird, the atmosphere was different. The conversation was lighter, more laughter-filled, more connected. We weren't just a family eating a meal, we were a unit that had just undergone a sacred ritual together. We talked about the story we had created, laughing at its absurd twists and admiring its unexpected beauty. We hummed snippets of the songs from our booklets. My mother kept glancing at the photograph on the mantel, a soft, contented smile on her face. My father, usually the first to finish eating and retreat to his armchair, lingered at the table, telling long, funny stories about his own childhood Christmases, stories I had never heard before. Then came the presents. We gathered around the tree, and the gifts were handed out. But the frenzy was gone. There was no ripping and tearing. There was a slow, appreciative unwrapping. When I opened my gift, a much-desired, brand-new bicycle, my joy was immense, explosive. I hooped with happiness, running my hands over the shiny red paint and the cool, chrome handlebars. But later, as I sat on the floor next to my new bike, looking at the scattered wrapping paper and the happy, tired faces of my family, I understood. The bicycle was wonderful, a dream come true. But its joy was a loud, brilliant firework. The joy from Tia Elisa's gifts, the remembrance, the song, the warmth, the nourishment, the starlight, the story, the joy was different. It was a deep, steady, warm glow that had settled in my very bones. It wasn't something I would eventually outgrow or put aside. It was a part of me now. The bicycle would, in time, get a flat tire, its paint would chip, and it would be relegated to the garage. But the memory of my mother's face illuminated by starlight, the sound of my father's voice singing a silly song, the feeling of being wrapped in warmth and safety with the people I loved most, those were gifts that would never tarnish, never break, never be forgotten. Tia Elisa watched me from her armchair, a knowing look in her eyes. She didn't ask if I liked her tradition. She could see the answer on my face, in my quiet contentment, in the new way I looked at my family. Her tradition hadn't replaced our Christmas, it had infused it with a deeper, more enduring magic. It had shifted the focus from what was under the tree to who was around it. That was the tradition my aunt brought, the one that made everyone smile on Christmas Eve. It was a tradition that didn't cost a fortune, but required everything you had, your attention, your voice, your memory, your imagination, and your heart. It was a tradition of presence. And as I fell asleep that night, the taste of eggnog and the vision of 1,000 paper stars dancing behind my eyelids, I knew, with the absolute certainty of a 10-year-old who has just witnessed true magic, that this was a tradition I would carry with me for the rest of my life.